Most people who fly FPV drones use a standalone RC controller like this Radiomaster Boxer Crush, but not everybody. You see, if you've got the DJI FPV system, then you have the option of skipping the traditional receiver and controller and instead using your DJI RC controller. But the steps for doing this are not exactly straightforward. So today I'm going to respond to more than a few emails from people asking, how can I get my DJI RC controller working with my DJI Air unit and not have to actually install a receiver and buy a separate standalone controller? I'm Joshua Bardwell, and you're going to learn something today. In this video, we are going to be using the Flywoo FlyLens 85 with the DJI O3 Air unit. But the first thing I want to tell you is that you do not have to be using this exact drone. You can be using any Betaflight drone with, well, I want to say any DJI Air unit, but I'm going to be doing this example with the DJI O3. I know for a fact that the things I'm about to show you also work on the Vista generation of Air units, if you've still got some of them. But since I'm not actually doing the demo with the Vista, I can't guarantee you that every single step is going to be exactly the same. Like, for example, depending on what goggles you've got, then like the menus are going to look a little bit different. Hopefully there's going to be enough information in this video for you to kind of muddle through if you're not using the exact Air unit and the exact RC controller and goggles that I'm using. Speaking of which RC controller and goggles am I going to be using? I'm going to be using the DJI Goggles 3 and the RC Controller 3. And one reason I'm doing that is because they're the latest and greatest. And another reason I'm doing that is because I lent my RC Controller 2 to Fabio, my editor, who he said, oh, I want to buy an FPV drone. And I said, dude, don't buy an FPV drone. And I sent him one of mine, and I sent him that controller. So I don't actually have the RC Controller 2 anymore. But that's okay, because the RC Controller 3 and the RC Controller 2 and the Goggles 3 and the Goggles 2 and the Goggles Integra, they're all compatible today with the DJI O3 Air unit. Yay! If you're using the DJI Goggles 2 or the Goggles Integra with the RC Controller 2 and the O3 Air unit, then it should work. I'm pretty sure that just works right out of the box, but it's still might not hurt to go ahead and update the firmware. And if you're using the Vista generation, then you definitely should update the firmware, because if you go back far enough, it's not compatible either. Long story short, you probably should update your firmware on everything just to make sure everything goes smoothly. There's one more gotcha here, and that is that you can't mix and match between generations. So for example, the RC Controller 3 will work with the Goggles 3, but it will not work if you're using the Goggles 2. Even though both the Goggles 3 and the Goggles 2 are compatible with the O3, you see, and likewise, the Goggles 2 and the Integra will work with the RC Controller 2, but you can't mix and match between the 2 generation and the 3 generation. The controller and the goggles have to be from the same generation, or this isn't going to work. With that out of the way, let's get into the actual freaking process. The next thing we're going to do is go into the menu on our DJI goggles, go to status, and we're going to need to change what type of device the goggles are ready to bind to. You can see here that I'm currently set to my DJI Avata 2, and that's not what I want. Instead, we're going to go to switch, and we're going to switch to the DJI O3 Air unit. Or if you're trying to bind to a Vista, then I believe the Goggles 2 and Integra say DJI FPV system. Fine. Once that's done, you're going to need to bind your goggles to the O3 Air unit, which is a process that I'm pretty sure you're familiar with. And we're going to need to bind the RC controller. And you would think you would bind the RC controller to the O3 Air unit, but that's not, in fact, the case. That used to be the case way back when. Like with the V1 goggles, the RC controller would bind to the O3 Air unit, which sort of makes sense, right? That's where the signal needs to go. But the way that the later generations work is that the RC controller binds to the goggles. Sorry about that. And then the goggles forward those control signals over to the O3 Air unit. The advantage of this is that the RC controller itself doesn't really need a high-powered radio. In fact, in the RC3, I'm pretty sure it's just like a Bluetooth chipset. It doesn't have any long-range capability. That makes this simpler and, well, from DJI's perspective, cheaper. The downside is that if you lose your video link, you also lose your control link because it's all the same link. Whereas if you have a standalone, or if you have the V1 system with the RC Controller 1, you could theoretically lose your video link, but still sort of keep flying and maybe sort of climb out or something and get your video back. That's just not possible with the later systems. It's just what it is. Okay, so my O3 Air unit is bound to my goggles, and you can see I have image in the goggles. Next, let's bind the RC controller. To put the RC controller in binding mode, I'm going to hold down the power button, until it begins to beep. And then here on the goggles, I'm going to hold down the power button, which is how you put them into binding mode. And there we go. They will stop beeping and yay, they will indicate that they are bound. At this point, we should be able to go into the menu in our goggles and go down to settings and control and remote controller. And we should see, if I go to, like, for example, RC calibration, we should be able to see the calibration work. And when I move the sticks, it should indicate that the goggles are talking to the controller. I'll go ahead and run through that now since I've never done it before, although it's probably not necessary. And sure enough, we do see movement here in the control. There's our dial, left and right. It's all good. There's one more setting we need to change here in the goggle menu before we get to the flight controller, and that is the protocol. The DJI O3 Air Unit outputs the SBUS protocol to the flight controller, and SBUS is not one of the modern ultra low latency protocols. So the DJI system has the option to do what's called Fast SBUS, which is basically just a lower latency version of SBUS. And you should totally use it. There's no downside to using it, and lower latency it's not a bad thing, even if you don't necessarily care if it's a good thing. So in the goggles, we're going to change the protocol from standard to SBUS baud fast, and we're going to leave it that way. You need to know that if the flight controller is not also set to use Fast SBUS, then the process we're going to go through isn't going to work. And a lot of people who have done everything right in setting up their DJI RC controller haven't got it working because they didn't realize that this option was there. I don't think it's a per air unit option. I think it's a per goggle option. So once you set it, you're good to go. But then you will also need to set this option in every flight controller that you set up to work with an O3 Air unit and the DJI RC controller. Next, we're going to plug USB into our flight controller, and we're going to go to Betaflight configurator. And we're going to need to jack with the configuration of our quad. So the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the presets tab, and we're going to hit save backup. We're going to just back up our configuration so that if I screw it up in some way, then I've got the ability to restore it. And we'll save that somewhere on our hard drive where we can find it again later. And I've had cases in the past where saving the config didn't work and the file was empty. So I'm also just going to open that file up real quick and double check. Yeah, there, it's a config dump. It's not just an empty file with an error message in it. Here's the next thing I want you to do. I want you to go to your receiver tab. And in your receiver tab, I want you to change the serial receiver provider from whatever it is to SBUS. If it's already at SBUS, good for you. We're going to change it to SBUS, and we're going to hit save and reboot. And then we go back to the receiver tab, and do you see all these colored bars here? That's what you should expect to see. If you change your serial receiver provider to SBUS and those colored bars go away and they are now blank and not colored in, what that means is that your firmware doesn't have support for SBUS baked into it. Don't freak out, we're going to fix it. Basically, the Betaflight devs noticed that Betaflight was getting so big that it wouldn't fit on all flight controllers, and they just decided that instead of putting all the receiver protocols on every flight controller, well, you're not using all of them, you're only using one of them. And so they only put one of them at a time. They did some other things to save space as well. If you change this to SBUS and you see no colored bars, just blank, empty rectangles, what you need to do is first make note of your flight controller target. Mine is Flywoo F405S. And then we will go to the firmware flasher, update firmware, and we will just try hitting auto detect for the target. Sure enough, it did auto detect the target. If it didn't auto detect the target for you, just go into the list and find your target. And then we're going to select our Betaflight version. I'm just going to leave it on 4.4 since that's what it shipped with from the factory. And we're going to change our radio protocol to SBUS. And we're going to reflash the flight controller with SBUS. And then we're also going to go and reload that CLI dump. In fact, let's go through the steps just in case. First, we flash, load firmware online, flash firmware. Okay. So now we've flashed it. We will connect. We will apply custom defaults. If it asks you to do that, go ahead and do it. And we'll go to the CLI and we can just load from file, our CLI backup, just in the lower right, load from file and execute. And then we'll type the word save, S-A-V-E, save. No, come on. The errors don't mean anything. That's nothing. I don't know what the problem is. Save. And then we'll come back to the receiver tab. And you see how now crossfire, but it's gray? That means this firmware doesn't support crossfire. Okay, great. Now we will change to SBUS. All right, so your receiver is set to SBUS and you have colored bars. That's the first step. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go into the CLI and we're going to type a command. It is going to be set SBUS _ baud fast. You can see autocomplete here is helping me out. I'll just click on it, set SBUS baud fast. You can also press the tab key to autocomplete if you like using your keyboard. We're going to set SBUS baud fast equals on and type the word save, S-A-V-E, and that will tell it we're using fast SBUS instead of normal SBUS. And that's a step you need. If you didn't do that step, nothing I'm about to show you would work. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to look at the wires coming out of your air unit, and you're going to verify that there are 6 wires coming out of it. If you see only 4 wires, then everything we're going to do in this video isn't going to work. Your manufacturer has shortchanged you. You see, the last 2 wires are for the DJI RC Controller, and every so often we find a drone where the manufacturer, this is a bind and fly. If you built it yourself, you're good to go. A bind and fly drone from a manufacturer comes with a receiver in it, and for some reason the manufacturer goes, well, we're not going to use the DJI RC Controller, so we're going to leave those wires out. What you would need to do then is you would need to buy or make a spare O3 wire harness and replace the one that's on your drone with that one so that you've got all 6 of the wires. So now we know that the DJI O3 air unit is connected to the flight controller, but we don't know what UART number it's connected on. And there's a couple of different ways we could try to approach this. We could just plug in the flight controller and look at the ports tab and like try to guess. It's not like the best way. So if I go to the ports tab, now I got a ton of UARTs here. Well, it's not UART 6, that's the air unit's OSD connection. Presumably it's not UART 1 because that's the one my Express LRS receiver is on. So it's one of these other UARTs, but like trial and error is only gonna get us so far. Instead, I'm gonna find the product page for this flight controller. Where is a wiring diagram? Wiring diagram. Where's a freaking wiring diagram? How the frick? No, that's not, I want, ugh, so annoyed right now. It should be linked on the product page. Hallelujah, hallelujah. After looking at that wiring diagram, I realized this flight controller doesn't have a plug for the O3 air unit. It's direct soldered. So I need to look and figure out where the wires go. If we look at the back of the air unit, we got black, red, white, gray, yellow. That yellow wire is the SBUS wire, and we need to know where that goes. Okay, got it. The pad is not labeled. So I see that that yellow wire is going to this pad, which is labeled SBUS 5. That must mean it's UART 5. Yeah, there we go. Oh, I'm a dumbass. Can y'all maybe figure out why my effing air unit is not effing working? Because my effing battery's not plugged in. Yeah, you need to, wow. FPV know-it-all doesn't know that you need your battery plugged in to frickin'. Okay, that part of the fan is spinning. This was gonna be such an easy video for me to knock out too. It was gonna be so easy. So ports tab, UART 5 is apparently the correct UART. And now when we go to the receiver tab, wha-bam, we have movement in the receiver tab. Oh yeah, look at that movement. Look at the sticks moving all around. Hallelujah. It works. It's not quite done yet. There's a few more things we need to do. We need to make sure the channel mapping is correct. We need to set up our aux modes, and I'm going to show you how to do all of that stuff. But by God, I can't think of a better time to do a plug for my Patreon. Patreon is a website where you can subscribe to me. You can reward me for all of the insanity I go through to make these videos for you, because I enjoy it, because I like to, you know, provide a helpful service to the world, but also because I need to pay the bills. And if I don't help you solve your problems, you won't join my Patreon and give me $2 a month. Jeez, it's been $2 since 2020. Inflation's eating it away. I'm paying twice as much for groceries, but you can still subscribe to my Patreon for $2 a month. What a freaking deal. Oh my God, go to the link in the video description and sign up. I mean, right? Come on. If this isn't worth $2, I don't know. Just watching me freaking make myself miserable. Okay, let's continue. Am I mewing? I'm not really sure what mewing is. The next thing we need to do is check our channel mapping. And what that means is that when we move the throttle, so I'm going to lower the throttle, we should see the throttle channel here in Betaflight go down and up. Correct. And the yaw axis, yaw left and yaw right. Correct. Pitch forward and back. Correct. Roll left and right. It looks like the default Betaflight channel mapping matches what DJI has set in their controller. That's very convenient, and that is probably not a coincidence. DJI probably did that on purpose. That means that probably yours is going to be correct pretty much always, but you should always double check because you never know. If your channel mapping is not correct, what you need to do is go here to the channel map parameter, and basically you rearrange the AETR. Do you see over here, AETR? Why isn't it roll, pitch, yaw, throttle? Why is it AETR? It refers to the airplane control surfaces, aileron, elevator, rudder, and throttle. Anyway, you're going to go and you're going to rearrange the AETR. For example, you can literally just delete and type RETA, and it'll just reorder those channels. So if the channels ever don't match up, you're going to shuffle these letters around until they do match up. But ours is correct, so we're not going to do that. We also want to check our endpoints are correct, and we're going to do that by lowering the stick all the way down, and we should see the endpoint is 1,000, and raising the stick all the way up, and it should be 2,000, and likewise for left and right. And if you have correctly calibrated the DJI gimbals, this should be exactly correct, as you see mine are. If this ever is not correct, or if you ever notice that the channel center is not 1,500, then you would need to recalibrate the gimbals as we did earlier in the video. Finally, we're going to need to set up aux modes, and aux modes means like when I hit the arm switch on the controller, as a quadcopter know that I mean for it to arm and so forth. And in order to do that, we have to see like which of these aux channels are mapped to which of the switches on the DJI controller. And we're just going to do that by trial and error. So I will just move this 3-position switch here. And as I move that 3-position switch, I can see aux 1 going up and down. And if I move this 3-position switch, that's aux 2. Okay, great. So these 3-position switches are working. I think that I would like arming to be on this 2-position switch here on the left. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find my arm mode and hit add range. You know what? I really always want positive feedback on an arm switch. I can't let this be because this switch is just, I can't tell by feeling it whether I'm armed or disarmed. And that's pretty important. I really need to be able to put my finger on the switch and know that it's disarmed. So actually I'm changing my mind. We'll put that back to auto, and we're going to make this 3-position switch, which is aux 1. What we're going to do is the default, the way that most controllers are set up is that the default position is with the switches pushed all the way away from you, and then you will pull the switches towards you to activate them. So we're going to push these switches all the way away, and that is going to be disarmed. And if we can look at this little yellow tick mark here, that's showing us the current switch position, right? So this is disarmed, and then armed is going to be all the way toward me, and I'm just going to click and drag this little yellow range so it covers the tick mark, and now this switch position is going to arm the quad, and we'll save. Disarmed, pushed away, armed, pulled towards. Next, we might want to put our drone into angle mode. Angle mode is auto level mode, which is similar to DJI's stability mode. And what I like to do is hit add range, and then we're going to move this 3-position switch to the middle position. And there we go, aux 2. Beeper, I like to be able to make the motors go beep, beep, beep in case I've crashed my quad somewhere and I can't find it. So we're going to add range for the beeper. And I guess this switch right here is going to be good for the beeper. It's just a momentary switch that I can press and make the motors beep. We could also use this switch here. Usually in my other controllers, it's on my right hand. So I guess this switch makes the most sense. Here we go, aux 4. And I believe that powers up in the middle position, and then pressing it makes it go to the high position. So that's because we want the beeper not to be going when we first power up. There we go, we can hear it beeping and turn off. LED low is used to turn off the LEDs. I'll tell you what, let's do. Let's make this arm switch also control the LEDs. I'm gonna hit add range, and what we're gonna do is that when the arm switch is in the uppermost position, the LEDs are off. Okay, now check this out. If I hit hide unused modes just to simplify the screen, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the arm mode, make the arm mode be active both in the low and the middle position, right? And what that's gonna do is when this switch is pressed all the way forward, we're disarmed. When this switch is in the middle position, we're armed and the LEDs are on. And when the switch is in the up position, we're armed and the LEDs are off. So that switch is gonna arm us, but it's also gonna turn the LEDs on and off. And if I save, we should, it looks like the LEDs aren't turning off. You can't see because it's over here. It looks like the LED low, I remember now. That's my bad. Hide unused modes, LED low, we actually control the LEDs with the user 1 mode. That's my mistake. Add range, bonk, save, And we're going to delete LED low. That was a mistake. Save. And now, if I pull this over here real quick, you can see disarmed, armed with LEDs on, armed with LEDs off. So my decision. Turtle mode. Flip over after crash, turtle mode. That is used if you crash and the quadcopter's upside down, you can flip it back over again. Be aware that when you crash and the quadcopter's upside down, a lot of times the motors will be jammed up with grass and sticks. And if you turtle mode too aggressively when the motors are jammed, you'll fry your flight controller, as I did. So maybe don't use turtle mode unless you're pretty sure that you crashed somewhere where the motors are clear, but it's nice to have an option. I'm gonna highlight the flip crash mode and hit add range. And I like to put that on this right hand, a 3 position. I believe we decided that middle was, so pushed away is the default, middle was angle mode, and so all the way up is gonna be turtle mode. We'll drag that over there and save. And now, if I hide unused modes, we can see my setup. The only thing left to do next is just to take it out and fly it and test it. And before we do that, some of you are thinking to yourself, wait, don't we need to make this throttle non-centering? Because unlike FPV drones, this throttle doesn't center by itself. It's not spring-loaded. And you can do that. There's a way to pull this back to the back and turn a screw and open it up and make this non-centered. But I wouldn't do that, and here's why. If you ever fly a DJI drone with this controller, you absolutely want the spring-loaded throttle, because on a DJI drone, when the throttle is centered, it holds altitude, and when you lower the throttle, it descends, and so you really need to be able to return right to center throttle so you can control whether it's climbing or descending. That's very, very hard to do just by feel. However, on an FPV drone, it is very easy to just manually override the spring-loadedness of the throttle and manually control the stick. The only risk is that if you were to let go of the throttle, it would bounce to center throttle and the quad could start to climb uncontrollably, but just don't do that. So I actually, in this situation, I always leave the throttle spring loaded. The only reason you would ever undo the spring loading on the throttle is if you never fly a DJI drone, you only fly FPV drones with this controller, but I'm gonna guess that's not the case for most people. And here's the obligatory test flight, which is just gonna look like me flying this drone, although you're gonna know that I'm flying it with the DJI RC controller instead of my usual Express LRS controller. And will you notice a difference? I don't know. But if I've finished this video and if I've done my job correctly, then right now you could also be flying your drone with the DJI RC controller, and then I'll feel good because I'll have helped you out. Oh God. Oh, I'm in angle mode. I see. I thought that was a little weird. Why am I in angle mode? Hold on. What's going on with my aux switches? Oh, there we go. Why did it... That's weird. The right-hand 3 position is being weird. It's defaulting to the middle position until you cycle it. Now it seems to be working fine, but it seems like it doesn't work correctly until you cycle it. And also, I'm just such a natural at flying drones that I just started flying and didn't even occur to me that I was in angle mode. I was just like, oh, okay, I'll just do this. Yeah, that's better. Oh, there we go. Whee! Oh, wow. So these sticks are mighty small and kind of sensitive compared to what I'm used to. Interesting. But that's something you can work around, I'm sure, by adjusting the rates in Betaflight. Or the expo curve. Yeah, oh yeah. I would definitely have a different rate and expo curve for this drone compared to my standard controller because the sticks are so much smaller, shorter. I wonder, you can't unscrew them and make them longer. You can unscrew them and disassemble them. Nevertheless, that's, I guess, your decision to make. You pay for the convenience of the RC controller with some inconveniences, but nothing can't be dealt with, I think. Well, it's going to take some getting used to be honest with you. I'm immediately going to go back to my standard controller as soon as I'm done with this video, just to be completely honest with you. Speaking of being done with this video, I guess I just about am. And enjoy. I'll see you on the next one. Whee! Oh, there you go. Just use the spring-loaded throttle and not even have to adjust throttle. Yeah, there we go. I'm not even touching the throttle. I'm just wibbling around, leaving the throttle at 50%. Yay! And killing my battery. Oh God, oh God, oh God, spring-loaded throttle. To lower the throttle and damn near put it in the ground. Oh, how do I disarm? Where's my disarm button? There we go, and there we go. Ah!